Order. Question the President of COP26. I call Fleur Anderson.
Question number 1 to the Minister, please.
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 1 and 2 together. The Prime Minister's 10-point plan sets out our blueprint for a green industrial revolution, a plan to invest in green technologies and industries, leveraging in billions of pounds of private sector investment, supporting up to 250,000 green jobs and levelling up across the UK. It's a clear plan to build back greener from the COVID pandemic.
I think it's grouped as well. Grouped. 1 and 2's grouped. Yeah. OK. Yeah. Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK's credibility as COP President rests on demonstrable climate action at home. The Government has set legally binding net zero targets, but is currently off track to meet its 4th and 5th carbon budgets, which are calibrated for previous, more lenient targets. Scrapping the Green Homes grant 2 weeks ago puts us into reverse. How will the Secretary of State seek to progress local, national and international progress on energy efficiency and specifically on green homes in the run-up to and during COP26?
President.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I say to the Honourable Lady that, of course, the UK has decarbonised its economy faster than any other G20 nation since the year 2000. We've met CB1, CB2, we're on track to meet CB3, and, of course, we are pursuing plans to ensure that we meet CB4 and 5. And ahead of COP26, we will publish a comprehensive net zero strategy.
Let's go to Andrew Gwynn. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has talked confidently about British leadership, but the Prime Minister's 10-point plan is full of big words but no real detail, and a total impact by the government's own admission that it will not meet the 4th and 5th carbon budgets. When you pull back the curtain, there's not much to look at and we're running out of time. He's just said, in answer to my honourable friend, that there will be a net zero strategy. We need it before the summer recess to make the government's word credible ahead of COP26. Does he agree with that? And if so, what's he doing about it?
President Shaw.
Mr. Speaker, as someone who is partly responsible for preparing the 10-point plan, could I suggest he actually read the detail of it? I've also discussed it in terms of the sector-specific points that are in there with individuals within different sectors of industry who have found it quite compelling. Of course, I agree with him that we need to be doing more, and that is why I have committed that we will publish the comprehensive net strategy ahead of COP26.
Let's go to Philip Dunn. Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What steps is my right honourable friend taking in his extensive discussions with leaders around the world in making progress at COP26 to develop a global standard or taxonomy of climate change impact in both financial reporting and in green labelling investment products?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend will know, the UK has taken a leading role in climate-related disclosures by implementing a green taxonomy and, of course, very importantly, making TCFD-aligned disclosures mandatory across the economy by 2025. In the conversations that I have with governments around the world, I'm urging other countries to follow a similar approach on financial disclosures. And when he talks about asset owners in the financial service sector, we are also encouraging asset owners and asset managers to make net zero commitments.
Substantive question to COP President.
Mr. Speaker, when the UK took on the role of the incoming COP26 presidency, under 30% of the global economy was covered by a net zero commitment. The good news is that figure has now increased to 70%, and of course I'm pressing all countries to come forward with net zero commitments. However, as colleagues in this House have acknowledged previously, the UNFCCC's initial NDC synthesis report published in February showed that we have much more progress to make in terms of 2030 emissions reduction targets, and I'm pressing countries on those as well.
Let's go to Ruth Edwards. Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is a global leader in protecting the ocean, as shown by the success of its Blue Belt and 30 by 30 programmes. But as my right honourable friend will know, only 1% of international waters currently have effective protection. Will he commit the UK to take the lead in pushing for a strong global oceans treaty at the UN to establish an international framework for protecting marine biodiversity in international waters?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend raises an incredibly vital issue, and so she'll be pleased to hear that the UK is working hard to see negotiations concluded this year on a new UN Convention for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdictions, and this will, of course, enable the establishment of marine protected areas and help to deliver on that 30 by 30 target.
Shadow Minister Matthew Pennycook.
The UNFCCC parties this week, the President rightly argued that we must halve global emissions by 2030 if we're to keep the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees within reach. Yet he will know that recent UN analysis makes clear that current national pledges will reduce emissions by just 1% by the end of this critical decade. We need the major emitters to do much more if we're to close the gap. That means deep cuts in American emissions and for Chinese emissions to peak by 2025, but it also means tangible progress on the part of India. With the Prime Minister meeting President Modi later this month, could the COP President tell the House what the UK is willing to put on the table, particularly in terms of climate finance and technological support, to help ensure India feels able to markedly increase its ambition ahead of the summit?
President.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree entirely with the honourable gentleman that, of course, all countries need to make much more progress when it comes to ambitious nationally determined contributions as 2030 near-term emission reductions targets. I have spoken with large economies around the world. As he knows, I met with President Modi a few weeks ago, and of course we are working on a number of initiatives with the Indian government. When the Prime Minister does indeed go to India, I'm sure there will be further announcements.
Another substantive question. President.
Mr. Speaker, we are working very hard to ensure that we deliver an in-person COP which allows all countries to participate on an equal footing. This is incredibly important as many parties feel strongly that negotiations must be in person. We continue to explore how technology and other innovations can make the summit more resilient, safe and inclusive.
Let's go to Martin Day. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for that answer. Many respondents, both academics and former COP attendees to the Beige Committee's survey of expert views, highlighted the important value of remote participation for otherwise excluded groups and for reducing the carbon footprint on the conference. So will the President explore the possibilities of wider virtual participation in COP in addition to the physical attendance at the conference?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman raises an incredibly important point. I've said on a number of occasions that I want this to be the most inclusive COP ever, and absolutely we are looking at how we can expand digital programmes to allow for more virtualisation, and I hope at the appropriate time I'll be able to update the House further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's reported in the papers today that a diplomatic source from the British government says, and I quote, "No one in Europe thinks it's going to happen, and the US is increasingly sceptical it can happen without delay." I support the COP President's aims for a physical conference of national delegations, but of course many stakeholders are politicians, business leaders, NGOs and others. When will the Cabinet Office produce the contingency plans to give clarity to stakeholders about how engagement can take place in November?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman again raises an incredibly important point. He will have seen the letter I've written to the UNFCCC members as well in terms of progress we want to make over the coming months. I would just say to him that COP26 has already been postponed by 1 year, and the urgency of the climate crisis has not abated. I don't sense any desire amongst parties for a further postponement, and we're working very hard to ensure that we have an in-person physical COP, taking into account, of course, any COVID-related contingencies.
A substantive question. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a new title. I was happy with International Champion, but I'm sure Vice Presidency would be acceptable too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The actions we're taking to tackle climate change support the delivery of a range of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Through the Together for Our Planet campaign and the Race to Zero, we are encouraging towns, cities and communities to drive climate action at a local level. This is supported by the COP26 UK Mayors and Regional Advisory Council, which includes West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Kirklees Council, and they have set themselves an ambitious target of being net zero by 2038.
Let's go to Barry Sherman. Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But with the Minister and certainly the Secretary of State, who I have great confidence in, will he ensure that what we're doing in Huddersfield, with making Huddersfield a sustainable town and a sustainable community, by rigorously pursuing the Sustainable Development Goals, we are building a network of towns across the United Kingdom. We're up to about 20. We need to get to 50 and 500. What can the government help us do this? Because it's a one way of grassrooting and making sure that COP26 is not COP-out 26.
I thank the honourable member for his question. I think it's so important that we encourage and indeed provide the tools, and the Together for Our Planet campaign is one of those, to help our constituents, our towns and our cities, to really understand and take charge for themselves of the impact they can have in helping meet our Paris Agreement challenge, and that involves everything from household choices through to changes in how we run our buses and trains, and every council and every community has a role to play in that.
Kim Johnson.
Question number 9, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, I have regular discussions with Cabinet colleagues about decarbonisation. My right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, is putting a green recovery for transport at the centre of his department's decision-making in the run-up to COP26 and beyond.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you for your answer. Liverpool City Region are developing a project to bring 20 hydrogen-powered double-decker buses to the streets, and the potential for further green investment to scale this up and achieve our ambition of being net zero carbon by 2040. Can the Minister explain when the £30 billion in-planned capital investment as part of the green recovery stimulus will be available to support our ambition? Thank you.
Well, Mr Speaker, I will ensure that the specific point she's raised is taken up with my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary. What I would say to her is that she will know that last month the Transport Secretary launched a multi-million-pound scheme to enable local authorities to roll out zero-emission buses, and this funding is going to deliver 500 zero-emission buses, supporting the government's wider commitment to introduce 4,000 such vehicles.
Let's go to SNP spokesperson Deirdre Buck. Deirdre.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, there's no joined-up thinking on any issue with this government, but we would all have hoped for some cross-department thinking on this issue at least. We are, as usual, disappointed with even the Green Homes grant gone after just a few months. So much for building back better. There's increasing concern voiced internationally, too, about the UK government's lack of progress domestically on environmental commitments. So will he show some real leadership then and commit today to start seriously lobbying his government colleagues to join up the dots and start delivering, so we can look forward to environmentally sound investment, renewed support for a comprehensive charging framework for electric vehicles, real investment in hydrogen technology and marine energy, support for housing improvements, and so on? Will he do that, or is he happy to leave us all embarrassed to be hosting COP26 while the UK seems to be striding off in the opposite direction?
Speaker, I'd just say to the Honourable Lady that the role of the COP presidency is to ensure that we are working with all 197 parties to ensure that we are making progress on keeping the 1.5 degrees within reach. Of course, the UK, like any other country, needs to see what more we can do. But I would just say I hope she will acknowledge that we are seen as a leader in the world. And indeed, since 2000, as I said, we've decarbonised our economy faster than any other G20 nation.
Kamranjeet Singh Dessi.
Number 11, please, Mr Speaker.
Climate change and biodiversity loss are inextricably linked. That's why the UK has made nature a core priority of our COP26 presidency. We pioneered and launched the Leaders' Pledge for Nature in September last year, and we are also driving global action to protect and restore critical ecosystems like forests and accelerating a transition towards sustainable agriculture, whilst mobilising the finance to support this.
In order to tackle biodiversity loss, the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15 in May, will support new targets on nature. However, with the environmental bill delayed yet again, how will the Minister ensure that the outcomes from this conference will feed into the COP26 in November this year?
The Prime Minister and President Xi have agreed that the UK and China should work together as respective hosts of the UNFCCC COP26 and CBD COP15 to reinforce and amplify those linkages between climate change and biodiversity loss, and to achieve mutually supportive and ambitious outcomes at both summits. So we're working closely with our Chinese counterparts and with the UN Secretariats of the UNFCCC, the CBD and the CCD conventions to strengthen those links between these conventions to deliver the best outcomes for nature.
Virginia Crosby.
Question 12, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, I've so far engaged with ministers and negotiators from over 80 countries and briefed all parties through the UN on a number of occasions. This, of course, includes discussions with representatives of countries including China, the US, the EU and India.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I thank the Secretary of State for his answer. In light of Germany's Coal Phase-Out Act, which states it will not end the use of coal-powered energy until 2038, how does the Minister intend to use COP26 to promote nuclear power, in particular at key UK sites like Wilvernereth on Anglesey, in order to meet the UK's net zero targets?
President.
Mr Speaker, my honourable friend is of course a consistent and strong champion of both the nuclear sector and the welfare side in her constituency, and of course I commend her zeal. But as I've said to her previously, nuclear power is clearly has a role to play in our clean energy mix as we work towards net zero emissions by 2050, and she will know in the 10-point plan the Prime Minister set out, we are backing large nuclear as well as SMRs and AMRs.
Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, I have engaged with hundreds of global and UK businesses through a combination of speaking at high-profile events and bilateral meetings, as well as through my COP26 Business Leaders Advisory Group. Businesses have a key role to play in tackling climate change, and I encourage them all to sign up for the Race to Zero campaign.
Well, Fletcher.
For that answer. Derbyshire County Council recently launched a £2 million Green Entrepreneurs Fund for businesses that are interested in green energy and carbon reduction. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this is an excellent example of local government and businesses working together, and will he share my praise for the County Council leader, Barry Lewis, for his visionary leadership on this issue?
Speaker, I commend both my honourable friend and, of course, the leader of Derbyshire County Council, Barry Lewis, for championing this excellent initiative. And this is precisely the type of scheme we want to see, supporting businesses, supporting growth and jobs whilst cutting emissions.
David Johnson.
Item 14, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 14, 15 and 16 together. I want COP26 to be the most inclusive ever, and the voices of young people are vital to this process. That is why I've set up an international COP26 Civil Society and Youth Advisory Council, allowing for a regular dialogue with youth activists, NGOs, Indigenous peoples and faith groups as we plan for COP26.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I have a pile of letters on my desk from children at Gems Didcot and John Blandy primary schools who've written to me to tell me what they've learnt about climate change, what positive changes they saw in the environment during lockdown, and to give me their ideas of things they think the government should be doing. Can my right honourable friend tell me how children and young people will be able to feed into the preparations for COP26?
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for championing the views of young people in his constituency, and of course I pay tribute to the pupils at John Blandy and James Didcot primary schools for their enthusiasm for climate action. I'll be delighted to receive their letters, review their ideas, and through him I will respond in writing to his constituents.
Let's go to Laura Farris. Laura.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My right honourable friend and I both have the privilege of representing seats in Berkshire, where many young people are passionate about climate change and are active in local groups like the West Berkshire Climate Action Network. This is their first real opportunity to see UK leadership in action. Could my right honourable friend confirm to me how they can access the Youth Council that he just described and other mechanisms to feed their ideas into the COP later this year?
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for the work that she also does in promoting climate action. I'd be very happy to hear from young people and youth groups in her constituency. What I can tell her, though, is that we will be engaging further with schools in relation to COP26 to unleash the enthusiasm and energy of young people across the UK to tackle climate change.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We all have a stake in protecting our climate, particularly young adults in my constituency, who I hope will be the pioneers of change. As part of the UK-Italy COP26 partnership, what are the plans for the Youth for Climate 2021 Driving Ambition event to be held in Milan in September?
Mr. Speaker, from the 28th to the 30th of September, the Youth for Climate event will bring together 400 youth delegates from across the globe to discuss topics under a range of thematic areas, and the event will culminate in a declaration and discussion between the youth delegates and ministers attending the pre-COP26 event.
We now come to topicals for the COP President.
Mr. Speaker, if we are to protect our planet from the ravages of climate change, we must support developing countries to respond. But without adequate finance, the task ahead is well nigh impossible. That is why on the 31st of March, the UK presidency convened around 50 developing and donor countries and multilateral institutions to consider how we can get more and more timely public finance flowing into climate action. I'm very pleased that we've secured a range of commitments from the likes of the World Bank, the IMF and donor countries to move this vital work forward. It is our moral duty, Mr. Speaker, to protect the most vulnerable communities from a climate crisis that they have not caused.
Let's go to Debbie Abrahams. Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how does supporting a new Cumbrian coal mine, giving new licences for oil and gas exploration, scrapping the Greenhouse Homes grant and reducing incentives for electric vehicles reflect the government's stated commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050? Or is this more dad-dancing rhetoric by the Prime Minister, unconvincing and uncoordinated?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady raised a number of points. I think in previous answers I have set out the ambition that the UK has and the progress that we've made, but specifically when it comes to oil and gas licensing, the UK government is going to be introducing a new climate compatibility checkpoint before each future oil and gas licensing round to ensure that licences awarded are aligned with wider climate objectives, including net zero emissions by 2050.
Go to Shirley McCauley. Shirley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Surfers Against Sewage in my constituency are ardent environmental campaigners, particularly on plastic pollution and water quality, and our environment is all the better for their work. The government has a key role to play on protecting the environment. So can my right honourable friend assure me that when the world gathers for COP26 in November, protecting and enhancing the environment, particularly for the people of Cornwall, is at the very top of their agenda?
Mr. Speaker, the COP26 Nature Campaign is driving ambitious international and domestic action to protect and enhance our environment, and this will be a high priority at COP26 in November. I commend the work that Surfers Against Sewage are doing on water pollution and water quality, which I hope to see firsthand when I visit Cornwall as part of the G7 summit in June. Protecting the ocean, including through nature-based solutions, provides multiple vitally important climate change adaptation and resilience benefits.
Secretary Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the COP president wrote that the world is, and I quote, doing nowhere near enough to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, and he's right. Now, a green economic stimulus could make a huge difference to meeting the target. But while we have put it as the top item on the G7 agenda, the sum total of the Chancellor's measures here in the UK promised us £12 billion of green spending over a decade, and he's already cut £1 billion from that. Our investment is 60 times smaller than President Biden's green infrastructure plan. Isn't it a very significant challenge for COP26 that when it comes to a green stimulus, we're telling others to act, but not doing so ourselves?
Well, look, Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman knows that we agree on many of these issues in terms of tackling climate change. But what I would say to him is that when it comes to government money, what we've also done is ensured that we leverage in private sector money. This isn't just about government money, it is also leveraging private sector money, and ultimately this is about not just cutting emissions, but also creating jobs for constituents across the UK.
As you will know, as COP26 hosts, our actions face particular scrutiny, and I think you will know the international community is increasingly concerned, and not just on green recovery. The government calls on others to power past coal, but flirts with a new coal mine. It says to others adopt a net zero target, but is off track on ours. And it tells countries to support the world's poorest, but slashes aid spending. Rachel Kite, former Special Representative of the UN Secretary-General, said this week about our record on climate, what the UK is doing is like dad dancing. They are very uncoordinated. Isn't it time the government gave up the dad dancing on climate and showed some consistent leadership?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know he himself is obviously a very good dancer and therefore is unlikely to take part in dad dancing. We should try it together at some point. Can I just say to him? Can I just say to him that, of course, every country, including the UK, needs to make more progress in terms of cutting emissions. He makes specifically reference to coal. He will know that our energy mix when it comes to coal has gone from 40% in 2012 to less than 2% last year. And we have been leading the Powering Past Coal Alliance, where a large number of countries have now signed up. So we are making progress. Of course, there is more that we can do.
We now come to Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I, right honourable friend, tell the House what diplomatic steps he has taken to engage with international partners on preparation for COP26?
Mr. Speaker, we're working closely at many levels with international partners on preparations for COP26 and to accelerate climate ambition. The COP President-designate has met large numbers of governments. He is already out and about visiting many countries, 15 in the last few weeks, and briefing UN member states on a regular basis. And I am working with the most vulnerable countries to make sure that they are supported for their ambitions to meet their resilience challenges.
We have the final question from Hilary Byrne. Hilary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Converting UK homes to zero carbon heating will be a huge task. Does the COP President believe that heat pumps can adequately replace all gas boilers? And if there's a need for supplementary heating, what form does he think this should take?
Mr. Speaker, I refer the honourable gentleman to the 10-point plan, which set out very clearly the progress that we want to make in terms of decarbonising buildings and homes as well. And of course, heat pumps will play a part. We've also set out in there our plans in terms of the use of hydrogen for home heating as well.
We now come to questions to the Prime Minister.